I don't know how close you want it. I don't know how close you want it because I don't want it to turn and hit the front of this and damage it. You know what I mean? Is that close enough?
I don't know. I suppose. All right, it is yet another day, many days after the previous video. Engine is in, trying to figure out where we're gonna weld the mounts at, tack, so we can put some bolts in there. Got it to where I put the drive shaft in it. Cross member, that's another thing. The one from the V6 and transmission that was on that is nowhere near in the right spot for the tail shaft of this one. So some customization is going to have to happen there. But we got to get this car to where it's mobile, and we got to move all that, because I would like to turn that shed up to there and finish closing this in, so we got somewhere completely closed in to work on this in the wintertime. So the Camaro, that already runs and drives. We just put 2 new rear floor pans in this and did some subframe work, and had to replace the wheel studs and lug nuts. So that's done. We actually just got back from a small little road trip in that yesterday. It recently passed inspection. Oh, so This has not moved in about a year. It definitely hasn't ran in about a year. I went ahead and hooked up a temporary gas tank and fuel line, put the carb and everything back on it. Working on getting the old tank out because it's not the right one if you followed along with this truck in the past. But we got to get this out of here so we can get some organization in place. Just trying to whittle down on the projects so they're not so overwhelming. This truck really is pretty close to being done. I just got to finish the bed sides and do a few little odds and ends, and this truck will be pretty well done. I just haven't had the time to work on it. The Camaro, it is what it is at this point. I mean, I'm really not gonna make it much better than what it is right now. It runs and drives, and that's just fine. But we gotta make the Cutlass run and drive, at least to where we can move it on its own power and have it stop on its own power. But I went ahead and got this to where hopefully we can hear it run and move it for the first time in a year. So let's get going on that. Well, it's the square body's turn to wake up after a year-long nap. Went in to pump the gas after I hooked up the battery and everything and got everything primed. and my throttle cable was not hooked up. So somewhere along the lines I must have needed that throttle cable stud and harvested it off of this carb. So I can't find that now, of course. So what you can do in a pinch is take a bolt with a couple washers, sandwich the washers in between the arm on the carburetor there, and tighten them up. Then put your throttle cable on, put another nut on, and then double nut it right here to where this is tight, and you got play there so it can't pinch itself. That could be a temporary / permanent fix, but who knows, we'll probably get the right thing put back on it, but this is going to work to get it to move out of here. All right. You can get an idea of how long this thing sat in here for. Had a bee nest above it. That was a nasty paper wasp nest. And they just made a mess of this thing. This paint has... I've never driven this truck with this paint yet, and obviously have never put any miles on these tires yet. So like I said, still got to put the bed sides on, but we got to clean all this crap out, because as everyone knows, if a pickup is sitting for a while, it just gathers tools and stuff and crap. But that's what we got to do. We got to clean and organize this. Okay, can barely see out of the windshield because of all the dust that's gathered on this thing. Friggin' cats have been climbing on it. Oh, I hate that. I don't even own a cat. And they're climbing. Let's see if I hooked up the wires properly to the new starter. Oh, stuff's coming on. All right. Give her a couple pumps. Holy shit. It's been a year since this thing's ran. All I did was prime the hose. First time I've seen her out in the sunlight in over a year. Gotta clean that paper wasp nest off of it. Oh, I just want them all to be done, but that takes time and money. All right, well, we got the motor mounts kind of in place where they're at. I got this dig bar here to move it. If you look like this, the engine is somewhat that way, but if you look through here, the water pump impeller is right there. So I'm going to tack that and then bring the tail shaft of the transmission that way, take some finer measurements. I mean, as long as it's within 1/8 and not sitting lopsided, and I can get the headers on both sides, that's where it's going to live. So yeah, let's get after it. All right, so now I'll show you what I got going on with the transmission tail shaft. So it's a little bit off center from the other one, and according to the engine up there, it's still going to go that way some, which is even further away from that mount. So I'm just curious to take some measurements off each frame and see where that sits as far as center. So what do we got here? Roughly 19 inches. I'm trying to do this all right, yeah, so roughly 26 inches there. So yeah, this is off center, and I don't know why. I guess I should have paid closer attention to the old transmission. I was just more focused on getting it out of there. This transmission tail shaft is centered. So, all right, got this side tacked in. It's still slightly off center from the hood latch, but even Damien had pointed out the cross member is probably like that from the factory, and it stands to reason because of how the transmission tail shaft cross member is offset. So I think that's as close as we're gonna get it. The measurements are the same. It's not crooked. I mean, within 1/8, not crooked. It looks as though I got plenty of room on this side and that side for headers, but who knows, we might have to do some header bashing. I'm not opposed to doing that. Got the linkage installed for the transmission, and that works. So yeah, now we got to make an adapter piece for that cross member to adapt to this transmission. So we'll get after that. All right, well, next thing, gotta make a bracket to weld onto that cross member for that tail shaft. And it's a little hard to do that when the mount is rotted off. So you need this stud to be able to measure from to make said mount. So I'm not saying cobble it by bondoing, but yeah, that's what we're gonna do. It'll hold it, then we'll buy a new one. But I don't have another one, so we're just gonna lather this up with Bondo and smush her up in there. All right, now we got her all lathered up. let's go ahead and install our new transmission cross member tail shaft mount or whatever. I better get that off before it starts to harden. That's gonna hurt if not. In case you didn't know, Bondo is a chemical reaction, and it gets hot. So you don't want prolonged exposure on your skin as I'm touching it right now. So let's make sure we're somewhat centered on that. All right, about there. That's where it's gonna be. If we gotta waller out the hole once we get a new one in there, then I guess that's what we'll just have to do. But this should be good enough to where we can make our mount for the cross member as soon as it sets up. All right, we'll be back. Well, it's not pretty, but it's in there temporarily. And this is certainly not a how-to video of how to fix your mount for your tail shaft. Again, this is simply just to get a measurement to make a mounting system here, because as you see, it's a ways off from that one. So, all right, let's get to it. Well, I made a crossmember adapter piece out of some square tubing. I'll show you what it is. All right, so gonna be somewhere around in there. I cut a slot in the stud hole there to have some sort of adjustment, because that one did. So now I can go ahead and tack this in place, and that should be just as strong as this was, if not stronger, to hold the transmission. If this ends up being too long up here, I can always cut that in the future, even where it is. I mean, to get the pan of the transmission off or what have you. But I'm going to tighten this nut down here and go ahead and buzz this up in there. So we will have a transmission tail shaft mount. All right. All right, guys. Well, it's time to pull this engine back out, because it's time to go through it, make sure all the gaskets are good, and finish mounting those motor mounts now that we know where it's going to sit. I got to finish welding up that transmission cross member, and we got to paint the engine bay and make sure all that's good before we put this together for the last time. So, all right. All right, guys, I didn't film it coming out of there this time, because it's extremely hard to do that by yourself, but it's back out. You can see we still gotta finish bolting and tacking the engine mounts, but they are where they need to be. So now we can go ahead and clean up all the engine bay and fix the floor pans and everything without the transmission in the way or exhaust or anything like that, because the floor pans do need attention. For those of you that don't know much about this car, it's relatively solid other than a few floor pans here and there. The frame's good. Well, G-body frame is good. Just a little bit of rot there going on the transmission tunnel, and a little bit on the driver's side floor pans, and just a tiny bit on the passenger side. The rest of it is in excellent shape. You can see my tail shaft mount that I made there. Gotta finish welding the top part of that. Another reason why the engine had to come back out, but it's kind of what you gotta do if you're trying to put something in something else that doesn't belong in it. A lot of trial and error and fitting here and there. Assembly and disassembly, but it's just part of it. Next time it goes in will be the last. So, yeah. I guess this is going to do it for this one, guys. If you enjoyed today's video, then be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Franklin Stein's Garage.